Welcome to the Tom Matt Show. You are walking through the front door of the retirement zone. And now, your host, Tom Matt.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. Thank you so much, as I like to say every week, for joining us, however, wherever, on the broadcast of radio, on the podcast of the internet, on the video of YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever we don't get them all, but it's like that's enough. Thanks to Vanessa. Vanessa is such a huge help for what we do here, Sandy, and of course Mitch Anderson. Last week, Ella Bosley was with us. She's just a fireball, senior at Michigan State University. Another journey into higher ed. Love promoting these young students who are going places. That kid is she's already in a dual master's program, got a 3.75 GPA, and setting the world on fire. I mean, it's greatness to see these young people just doing what we can do to help them achieve and flourish in their lives. That's what we're all about at Michigan State University. Today, calling this one an MSU legend, and I mean that sincerely, an MSU legend, the controller. David Brower is going to be our guest today. Long term. His bio is so long, if I read this, we'd have about 10 minutes to talk. So I'm going to hit it here and there. Dave Brower is a native of the Lansing area, graduated from Okemos High School, attended MSU, good for you, go green, completing his BA in accounting in 1969 and his MBA in finance 1970. There are so many stories that we're going to try and get to. David will be back, of course, because he's very much involved with the MSU Retirees Association. One of the reasons he and I became friends was to try to explore and help promote the MSU Retirees Association, all the good things that they do. Dave is a perfect example of all of this. He's been, as we were just talking about pre-production, everybody, David Brower has been walking and living the retirement zone his whole life. I mean, everything from when he worked over at Ernst Ernst. I'll get to all this thing here. He was auditor at a public accounting firm of Ernst Ernst, Lansing Office from 71 to 79. That was the beginning of his retirement zone, right out of college. Got his CPA certification in 73. Then he decided to make the jump over to the big green machine, and from there we're going to let Mr. Brower talk about all the things that he's done in his life, because again his bio is so long. But let me tell you, I have to compliment him on all of his volunteer work that he has done with the YMCA, Lansing Jackson Capital National Association of Accountants for years. He's been in that. He's been all over the place. Capital Area United Way board member, volunteer of the year, 1999. Everything he's done, all kinds of stuff. He can go into all the details. So many different groups have benefited from this very, very smart man's life and journey. And I want to welcome to the radio program my friend, Mr. Dave Brower. David, thank you so much for making the time, and let's have some fun.
Okay, great, Tom. My pleasure to be here.
The way we work here, my friend, is this is your life. Okay, so I just barely touched on your beginning of your life. But this first segment is really just to get you warmed up, talk about family and your journey coming into Michigan State and as a kid growing up in mid-Michigan. Like to hear the historical perspective so that you can give to other people, what was it like? What was it like back in the 60s in Okemos?
I'll tell you, I was born in Lansing and lived there till the 5th grade. And my first memory is as a 4 or 5-year-old going to Spartan Stadium with my dad and going to a football game, and at that time, Don Coleman was an All-American lineman. And I remember his name coming across the scoreboard. And ironically enough, many years later in the 70s and 80s, at the stadium, he and his wife actually sat next to me in the stadium. So when it comes to my life, I think I'd have to say that I definitely have green blood. My parents met and went to Michigan State. My sister and 2 brothers have all gone to Michigan State, so we definitely are strong Spartans. I moved to Okemos in, I think it's the 5th grade, and even then, Okemos did not have, at their new high school, tennis courts. So I managed a letter in tennis, but our home courts were MSU. Okemos didn't have the courts, so we played all our games on the MSU tennis courts at that time. But my life has always been revolved around the Spartan athletics initially, but then I started getting antsy to maybe move into something else other than public accounting. You're always auditing things in public accounting, and I was on the audit at Michigan State for several years and was supervising the audit, so I got to know a lot of the financial staff. And in 1979, the controller called me and said, I have a position that I think you might be interested in. And it turned out to be a perfect fit for me, a chance to start managing something and moving forward and making changes in an organization that I had already developed a great affinity for.
So you started your career as assistant controller, and I had to ask you, and I don't know how many other people out there in the world, I'm going to ask the obvious questions, everybody. What in the heck is a controller? Because kind of what the term is, but it's like, and then you understand that the controller could be the CFO as well, and at an organization at Michigan State. So let's start at the very bottom. Let's start at what the heck is a controller?
Sure. The controller basically oversees the business operations of an organization. They're supposed to maintain the internal controls to protect the assets and maintain appropriate records and do the appropriate accounting and the reporting that needs to be done, whether it's the IRS or to various regulatory agencies. So they developed a framework that handles all the business functions within an organization. The difference between a CFO and a controller really is a CFO more focuses on cash management, managing the cash, maybe borrowing money, but looking more strategically at the needs of the institution, the types of things that need to be done to really move the institution forward in a strategic way. So the controller is more at an operational level, looking at the day-to-day operations and trying to maintain the right balance of controls and procedures.
So you started out as the assistant controller of student services. What did that job entail back then, Dave? Because that would have been what, in the
79 to 80,
yeah,
82.
So give kind of a little bit. We got about 3 minutes to go in this segment, but kind of give a setup as to what was the university like in those days.
Well, certainly, my responsibilities were over the student areas, student receivables, the scholarships, cashier's office, managing all the functions that dealt with collecting the money from the students for tuition and other costs. And at that time, we had a very manual registration system. Every term, we were on terms in. 4 times a year, you would set up a place in the IM West, which is going to be torn down now, but we'd have about 200 people we hire plus staff go over there, and we'd literally have all 40,000 people go through and pay their tuition and fees. Prior to that, they had to stop in what was known as the pit. And the pit was literally an area where you had to fill out your schedule of classes. And you actually had to pick up a IBM card. At that time, we had cards. And that was how you basically put your schedule together. And they did it by alphabet. So sometimes the beginning of the alphabet, sometimes the end of the alphabet. But if you were at the end, it wasn't unusual for people to be in the pit for hours. To try and wait for classes to open up or to get a section they needed to meet some of the criteria they needed. And the saying at that time was, if you could survive the pit, you probably could get through college because it took patience and perseverance.
So okay, let me set this thing up because I never experienced the pit myself. I didn't start at the university until the late 90s, but I'd heard a lot of stories about this. And of course, I know IM West very well. And we're going to run out of time in this segment, Dave, so I'll just kind of set this thing up here. But the pit and IM West, all of the students, you'd have 200 people that you'd hire. You'd have all of the students come through not only to pay their fees, but to have their cards so that they could get their classes and the scheduling, right? Is that kind of the setup?
Right. You had to initially go to the pit area to get your classes set up. And after hours, sometimes they would finally get to us. There were 14-hour days, and we saw a lot of people that were totally worn out, and the last thing they wanted to do was worry about paying fees. But there were student taxes at that time, Tom, and I think 75 cents. And we used to take containers of quarters over there because the students who get through, they have all their tuition and fees paid for except for the student tax, which had to be paid to register. So we'd give them a couple quarters wherever they needed to get registered. So
these are the kind of people that if you don't understand the foundation, you never understand how we got here. Because it's completely changed. So many people are going to listen to this and they're going to say, not only do I know Dave Brower, but I went through the pit myself and I experienced that, and it was sweaty and hot and nasty, and IM West, and there was no air conditioning, and yeah, 12 hours later you might get your classes. Again, Dave Brower is our guest today, an MSU legend, the controller. This is the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome to the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. Calling this one an MSU legend, the controller. David Brower's our guest today. Dave Brower, he is a legend at MSU, worked out there over 32 years. The thing about it is it's just the foundational work that he experienced and some of the systems. We're going to talk about a lot of the systems that David worked on that are still implemented today. And because you have to understand, everybody, you have to understand where we were and historically to where we are now so you can make good judgments on, are we doing the right thing? Are we being good stewards of the university? Before we go there, though, I gotta do my read for my brother from another mother, Brock Fletcher, and the whole team. Mikey Deadman, Brock Fletcher. They're just wonderful people over there. The selling team of Keller Williams Realty. The middle name is Trust, Trust. Just like the story I've told you guys 100 times about Big House Holt and how Brock gave me the advice about thinking about downsizing when we had no inclination whatsoever of ever getting rid of Big House Holt. Never. Unless we moved to Wisconsin, which we almost did, but that didn't happen because this thing called COVID came along. Thanks to Brock and the selling team, he helped us tremendously with all of our decisions. And that's the whole thing about Brock. It's the education. It's the friendship. It's the collaboration that you can do. And we've done it twice now with him. And it's just fantastic to have those people and those friends in our pocket. Phone numbers, 517-853-6408. The super secret, not so super secret number is 517-303-3262. 517-303-3262. That's Brock's cell phone number. Text him, leave him a voicemail. He will return your call that day. Go online to kwsellingteam.com, kwsellingteam.com. You can go to the tommattshow.com at the bottom of our homepage. You can click on through and it'll take you right through there. We have several of our sponsors and friends down at the bottom that we want to promote. Sell your home without hassles like we did. Buy your home without hassles exactly like we did. Upsizing, downsizing, right sizing, doing all those good things. Go listen to some of the reality of real estate if you want. If you just want to do like a quick interview kind of thing and it doesn't cost you a dime, but we've got 25 or 30 episodes of the reality of real estate we've done in 15 years. And Brock is the star of pretty much all of those. So please go check those out. Again, remember, the selling team of Keller Williams Realty, they are the best and we trust them, love them so much. Again, I want to say thank you to Joan Wright from Williamston who listens to us on WKAR on Sundays at 5. Thank you, Joan, for what you do and hope you're feeling well. And we will talk to you soon, I'm sure. Thank you to Brock for introducing me to Joan. All right, back to our guest today. David Brower is our guest. Many people who are associated with the university would probably remember the name David Brower. David is pretty much, as I call this one, an MSU legend, the controller. David was kind of giving us the lowdown because seriously, I didn't really understand. I kind of did. I knew the controller had something to do with accounting, but David, that whole role, I have to ask you about, because you were an MSU assistant controller, student services, where you first started. And then you got the position of assistant controller of administrative services in 1982. So what was the difference between those two roles? Is it just a step up, more responsibility? Let's just start. Let's do the foundational stuff, David. Let's talk about that. Would you please? What's the difference between those two roles?
Sure. As I mentioned before, the assistant controller is on the first floor is a student affairs assistant controller, and they handle the operations related to students, receivables, scholarships, and cashier's office. When I went to the administrative areas, all the internal functions, accounting, payroll, financial analysis, all the reporting that had to be done, insurance, other areas that handle the business aspects of the organization. So it was a entirely different area of responsibility. And one of the biggest responsibilities was managing the annual audit, which was a big project and kept me busy and most of my staff busy during the summer months. By law, we were required to have an audit. And as the university grew and became more complex with research, contract, and grants, it added layers of additional work that we had to be responsible for to make sure we handle all the reporting and taxes.
Is that still true to this day, to your knowledge, that by law the university has to have an annual audit? Is that Absolutely.
You would have to have it if you had bonds outstanding. That's one of the requirements. But yes, the federal agencies require an audit, and the state requires an audit. So that is something that's still done to this day.
So basically, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. It's a major effort. And at that time, we had a very old financial system was developed by one of my mentors and colleagues when he first started, a man by the name of Steve Terry. He actually helped to create the financial system, which was a accounting system that had no workflow processes and had no central reporting. And we only prepared accrual statements for the audit at June 30 year end. And so one of the projects I got involved in was looking down the road, how do we replace this aging homegrown financial system as the institution became more and more advanced.
Okay, hold up a sec. Excuse me, David. But step back first, just so people are clear with this, because we're talking the very, very beginning of the data processing systems at the university. So with Steve Terry, the gentleman you just mentioned, you just had a very foundational auditing kind of system that you guys created, or he created. And from there, it was like, but you were doing everything via paper, right? Everything was still
pretty much, and the departments had to do things on their own. They developed when the computers finally came along. They all had their little central homegrown PC systems. None of this articulated centrally. It was very difficult for us to know what was going on at the unit level or the college level. We just didn't have a central system, and it was arcane and needed to be replaced.
When did you realize? When did it become clear to you that you were going down this path and that a central system? Because I had no idea that these colleges, being out at the university as long as I was, I can see what you're saying, that each unit would have their own little kingdom, their own silo. But how quickly was it when you realized that you needed that central system?
Well, we knew it for decades, quite honestly. I became controller in about 95, and we were starting to work on it at least in 1990, looking for software packages we could buy. But most accounting systems aren't robust enough for a university because, unlike other organizations, a faculty or staff member may have multiple accounts that they have to be paid from. And the accounting structure that's needed is just not robust enough in most systems that are available on the market. So we formed later years, and probably took till about mid-2000s, 2005, that we found a consortium we wanted to work with, several universities, 7 of them, and we got a grant from the Mellon Foundation to develop an open source financial system. By that, we mean we would develop a financial system that was available and free to institutions as long as they kept all the developments in the open domain.
When David was talking about, bringing everything together and all of the units and the silos, as I mentioned, bringing all of their systems together, there was no campus network. There was no. So that's the piece I want to come back to when we come out of break here. Is like, well, how did you get the handoff from, say, the College of Engineering to admin and all of the things, all of the peripherals that go along with, see everybody, you got to kind of get a picture of what a grand scale. Dave's kind of glossing over this thing, but I've been involved with this pretty deeply with things. It's like, there's so many layers to the university with account numbers and all this stuff. You have no idea. So we're going to step back for a second because we're going to break right now. Let me reset. David Brower is our guest today. This is going to be really fun. An MSU legend. That's the thing about having legends like a David Brower on the show. He can tell us the historical perspective of the pit, of standing in line for 12 hours, sweating. An MSU legend, the controller. My guest today is David Brower. This is the Tom Matt Show.
Thank you again to Brock Fletcher, real estate agent at the selling team with Keller Williams Realty. For more information on services provided by Brock, please call his personal cell phone at 517-303-3262 or by emailing Brock at kwsellingteam.com. This is the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome to the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. I love stepping in the time machine. Stepping in the time machine is just fun. I'm kind of a history guy. Read all kinds of biographies on presidents, and I just kind of just war stuff and historical perspective. I just find it very fascinating to understand, like the historical perspective of sports and the historical perspective of academics and all of these things. If you don't understand the backbone of how we got there, then you'll never understand where we need to get to, is what I'm trying to say here. But before we go there, I got to do my favorite part of the show. It's where we do the testimonials for Brock. This one's from Ruth. I'm going to do a couple of them, you guys. This was from Ruth. It was scary and exciting all at the same time. However, the selling team was patient, knowledgeable, and extremely helpful. I would not hesitate to recommend the selling team to anyone, especially a first-time home buyer. First-time home buyers. We're going to do a show just on first-time home buyers here very soon. That's from Ruth and Holt. Ruth, I'm glad you had a good experience with Brock and the team. Another one from Ed and Ashley in Lansing. The selling team was amazing to work with. Super friendly, helpful, professional, and just great. They really worked and walked us through the process of buying our first home, which we really appreciated. Of course, buying your first home is huge. I would definitely recommend them to everyone, and I will use them in the future if and when we have home buying needs, which we always do because life changes, things happen. Our experience with them was A+, bold type from Ed and Ashley, again, from Lansing, Michigan. Phone numbers. First one is going to be Brock's cell phone, 517-303-3262, 517-303-3262. Office is 517-853-6408. You get a hold of them. You can go to kwsellingteam.com, kwsellingteam.com, and tell them you heard it from Tommy, because when you say Tommy, they know it's radio, and it all helps everything because they need to know if they're getting bang for their buck on their investments. Speaking of investments, got the perfect guy today, David Brower, the controller and MSU legend. David, before we get back into the historical perspective, I just want to step back just a tiny bit, because when you took over as the controller, you were also assigned the duties of the CFO, which now is two separate big jobs. I think we talked about that a little bit. You did, at least. But managing both of those jobs, kind of step back again and just tell everyone why that's really, you need two people. I mean, because you mentioned the CFO had the cash management aspects, but I'm looking at like, well, aren't there giant endowments and like money to be managed and things like, wasn't that your territory?
What became that basically because of budget reductions for 20 years. President McPherson at that time wanted to look for ways to consolidate positions, and Mr. Terry, I mentioned earlier, retired, and so the decision was made to consolidate controller's position with the CFO position. And because I really had hired people over all those years and virtually throughout the controller's office, I knew I had the bandwidth of skilled people that I could rely on to help me manage the controller's office functions, while I spent more time, because the financial vice president position, the assistant vice president position, put me over a contract and grant administration, over investments, over all the cash management endowment areas. And yes, MSU had $500 million in research grants at that time, and it had probably endowments of at least that much also, and that we were growing endowments. So it was a big area of responsibility, but at that time we were also looking at trying to put in new financial HR and payroll systems. And so we knew we had to have a strategic steering committee to help move, because we were paper-based. If you can imagine this, we had all the payments and invoices came in on a piece of paper, and we processed them, and we had 80 5-drawer files of invoices and paperwork every year for just that area. And it took us about the middle of the month to get the ledgers out to the campus. And that's arcane. And, you could go down all the other types of documents. Payroll documents were all paper-based, and the receipts and everything else of collections paper-based. So we knew we had to get into the 21st century as client-based computing came along and workflow process came along. When I became controller in 1995 and then took over the joint position as assistant VP, CFO, and controller, I was already working with other members within the campus community to look for ways to solve this problem and bring us into the 21st century. Okay,
before we jump into the 21st century, I want to jump back in here to the 19th century. Let's go back to, how did the colleges, okay, so you've got this paper-based system. I hope everybody's getting a picture, because I'm trying to do theater of the mind here and trying to look at the administration building, look at the giant campus, look at all this, and think about all the mail and all the paper and all the stamps and all of it. And you got to read all this stuff. And it's not like you can just jam through and eat. There was no such thing as email. But how did the palaces, each kingdom of the colleges, and I'm no offense, don't nobody get offended. I'm not trying to bust anybody's chops here, but it's like each college is important. Each college has their own thing that they do, and they and their world revolves around their world. I get that totally. How did they get was it the Pony Express delivering you buckets full of literature and mail and requests? And then how did you do like service requests and any of that kind of stuff? How did that work?
Everything worked by snail mail, but a lot of deliveries. Students were kept busy bringing paperwork back and forth to the administration building and vice versa to the various colleges.
So it was students. Students did the delivery system.
A lot of them, yes. I mean, we had a very robust mail staff then too, but it really, thinking back about it, it's amazing how things had to be done so manually back then.
I want to give you time to give credit to your staff because you've talked about that pre-show a couple of times. So please, I mean, we can continue to throw love to all the people that worked for you and with you and the collaborations that you had. Talk about some of those people because, I mean, this sounds like it's just the giant anthill with just millions of ants.
The controller's office had 125 employees. When I started, there were virtually no women in managerial or assistant manager roles, and they weren't in the accounting area because women just weren't getting into the accounting profession at that point, Tom. And working with our accounting department, over the next 20 years, we developed a cadre of talented people, and women started taking and going through accounting and then working through public accounting so that they were actually skilled enough to take over our skilled positions within the controller's office. So when I left, I had probably almost a 50-50 mix of women and men that were in responsibility positions. And I spent a lot of time every year meeting with the staff, trying to develop them, sending them development opportunities. And as I said, one of my legacies and things I'm most proud of is that I left behind a very, very strong financial staff and central administration to work with the colleges and the rest of the campus. And a lot of those people rose up into leadership positions, and now they're retiring, and I'm starting to feel really old because people I hired out of school or out of public accounting are now retiring and joining me in the retiree association. All
right, I'm going to give you some kudos here because we got a minute and a half to go before we go to break. David Brower is our guest today, everybody, an MSU legend, the controller. I have to say, because I know that I worked for Dr. Roy Simon, for virtually my whole career, and he was a huge mentor to me. But the staff development that he was always encouraging me, like for my bachelor's and my master's degree, full credit to him. You're the same way with your staff, with staff development. Obviously, if you started in there were virtually no women in that field, and then by the time you retired in 2011, it was about 50%. That's tremendous. So good for you on all that. And the staff development, give me a minute on classes and how much you encouraged your staff to take these developmental courses so that they could advance.
Well, I've tried before even it was in vogue to encourage women and men to consider going on to advanced degrees. We would help them get time off if they needed to go on beyond the undergraduate degree. And also, I think one of the reasons I got a Supervisor Year Award in 2009 was a recognition that I tried to make sure that staff, men and women, if they had to take time off for maternity leave or whatever else, that they felt that we were making a long-term commitment to them and that we wanted to help them develop their families and achieve their life goals by continuing to also be part of our workforce.
David Brower is our guest today, everybody. An MSU legend, the controller. So much can be said for staff development, that inherent feeling of these long-term employees that are family members. Everybody who's been there for more than 5 years gets it. They start to get the feeling of that you're part of the family, you're alumni. Once you are attached to the university, you never really leave at MSU. Again, David Brower is our guest today, the controller, an MSU legend. This is the Tom Matt Show.
This segment of the Tom Matt Show is brought to you in part by the Source of Light and Power by band leader Arc of All and broadcaster Mitch Anderson. Hear the sound that is endorsed by Odyssey headphones, linear tube audio, RME converters, and Peluso microphones at sourceoflightandpower.bandcamp.com.
Welcome to the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. Thank you, Sandy, for doing that bumper intro, bringing us back. The only time you ever hear her on radio is in that one recording session that we did with Mitch Anderson. So great. Again, thanks to Mitch Anderson, our audio producer extraordinaire, and Vanessa for doing all of the video content and crazy ideas that we come up with, because we come up with a bunch of them. The controller, an MSU legend, the controller, David Brower is my guest today. Love doing the Sparty stories from the historical perspective. David Brower has deep roots. We're going to talk about the systems here pretty quick, but then some of the systems that he implemented, because we're going from stone and flint, spark, fire, to Bic lighter, to blowtorch. Okay. But you got to make the steps through through the whole. You guys picking up what I'm saying? You don't go out and throw a 97-mile-an-hour fastball without playing Little League first. Okay, and sometimes Little League is really hard, really, really hard. Before we get back into the story, it's a fun story. David, how would you like people to connect with you? Your email or phone number, whatever, for speaking engagements, or it's not like you don't volunteer for every group that's out there. So it's like, what the heck? What's another couple more groups?
Yes, my email address, Tom, lowercase Brower, BROWER, at MSU.edu. I was one of the first people to get an address and didn't know where this thing was going, so I never even added an initial. So it's just my last name and MSU.edu.
All right, because you opened up that can right there of technology, and we're going to cover a lot of that here in the rest of the show. But the email system that we just everybody takes for granted. So we were talking in a previous segment about, all the students with the Pony Express and bringing the bucket full of mail and hauling stuff all over the place. So you're getting closer to where you actually might envision a network. Were you involved with that? Because now we're coming into my world. We're coming into the telecom world and fiber and copper and the Roy Simon world and Luana Simon investing all that money. Were you part of that initiative of just sort of connecting the buildings?
Actually, yes, because none of our buildings were set up for internet connectivity, and none of us had many computers. We all had hand-drawn or hand-run machines that were clunky, and none of us knew how to use computers. So we had to be trained how to use the computers. And first of all, we had to get the buildings wired to be able to handle the internet, and that took funding. And so we had to develop funding and mechanisms over years to start replacing all of our old equipment.
Were you surprised when you started looking at those funding models for like the thin net and then the Ethernet and then the fiber optics and all of the twisted pair wire? Because let me remind everybody now, this is before the divestiture of the phone company, and the phone company had the campus network pretty much with the phone network. And I'm very aware of all of that stuff, but that was all owned by the phone company. So when they broke up the phone company, not only did you have to have computer networks, but you had to have phone networks as well. So you had the double whammy happen in there, didn't you, Dave? So now we're talking, how do we connect these buildings, and where did that all begin? Who were you involved with that one?
Virtually all the administrative information services areas and then infrastructure. And quite honestly, we had to develop rules and procedures. People were starting to get cell phones, and they wanted to have that stuff paid for by the university. And so we had to develop a set of rules and regulations when we would pay for it and how we would pay for it. And it was a big adjustment in how business was being done. All the workflow processes were changing because of this technology we were adding. Was
there sticker shock involved when you started doing some of the shock?
Huge amount, because cutting edge technology is always higher in the rate of inflation than other parts of the economy. And none of this stuff was built in the budget. We all had equipment budgets within the university, but they were small. And the cost of these equipments, and the need to get everybody in the institution this kind of support was a big strain on the budget.
Well, and again, let me step back, everybody, because with the Bell system and the copper wire that was running between the buildings and then out to the world is how you had the connectivity to make phone calls on the campus. That was all owned by the phone company, and it was all rented, leased. And all of the equipment, all the 6-button, 10-button, 20-button telephones, those push-button phones with red hold buttons, and blinky blink lights, that was all put in by the phone company. I installed that stuff in the beginning of my career, David. And let me tell you, that was some hard stuff. That's just on the phone side of things. So the sticker shock that you guys, because I know those phone bills from the phone company were just unbelievable. So now you're getting not only the equipment, the computing equipment, but the phone equipment, it's all happening about the same time. And this had to be in the 80s. In the 80s was when the
90s, more in the 90s.
Yeah, but the divestiture started in the early 80s. So by the time you got into the 90s, things were rolling, right?
Right, exactly. And it changed the way we were doing business too, because there's a tendency to never get disconnected from the organization. As technology and emails and cell phones came along, I remember the first time I had a chance to really interact with President McPherson was after a home football game. He called about an issue we were working on. I think it was 9:00 at night. And so
he called on the phone. He called on a telephone.
So, yep. And so It changed the way we did business in positive ways, and allowed us to really reach out, whether we were on campus or off campus, to continue to get things done. But it also forced you to rely on your colleagues, your team, to get things done, because we were moving around more and out of the office more, and there had to be people there to handle things as they came up.
Okay, so right about that time, everybody. So I'll give you that's enough of the historical, a little bit of the historical. But let's get into the next step, because you had to come up with that precursor to what I think of is what they call on campus, or they used to everybody EBS. Is that right, Dave? You guys were on the very front end. Talk about the front end of that, and what was that all about?
Sure. We had worked on student information systems in the 80s and 90s and automated that process we talked about earlier, Tom. Mm-hmm. But the financial, payroll, and HR systems in the 2000 period, the financial system was approaching 35 to 40 years old, and the HR payroll system was 25. They had no workflow process. They were still paper-based. They were clunky. And so we knew we had to form a steering committee to help direct this evolution for the university. And let's be honest, the departments that developed their client-based computing systems, they weren't necessarily interested in working to replace all that stuff they've laid it in the department level or college level with a central-based system.
All right, so let me interject just for a second here, Dave. Please allow me to do this. What Dave's referring to, everybody, is all the silos. Okay, now I'm coming on campus now, but it's like late 90s. And so, and I'm starting to understand that these different kingdoms and these silos, and they have their own phone systems. They have their own computer systems. They have their own email systems. They don't want to deal with any of this network, nothing. They're just like, no. Okay, Dave. So I'm just kind of setting up a little bit of a perspective here. You're swimming upstream without a paddle hard, because they already had invested all this money. And so it's like, and then you're
going to take more money to switch over to a new system.
Exactly. So continue. I'm sorry, David, but I like to add a little bit of color perspective to that.
And we were doing a number of things behind the scenes. People at that time wanted to have automatic payroll deposit. And because of the pay-in date cutoff, which was cutting off on a weekend and paying on the next Friday, there wasn't enough time to use the automated clearinghouse system used. So we had to work with several employee groups to actually change the pay-in date for their staff. And that meant negotiating with the unions to get this arranged and to arrange a payoff system, because if you cut off the payroll early, they were short money. So we gave them a period of time to we advance the money to them, they get a period of time to pay us back. So there's all these things we were doing behind the scenes while we're looking for a software system that we could use and adapt. And basically stop gaps to all of these, because when you figure out one issue and fix one, you find three other problems or potential problems coming, correct? Right. And in payroll, we were paying everybody by check. And that was costly and problematic, because people were already starting to forge checks, particularly the ones we sent overseas. So we knew we wanted to get out of the check business. And so we eventually, when we were out in the new system, went to pay cards.
I got to tell you, when you guys went away from paper checks, I was bummed out, because I'm being skilled trades. We got paid every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, you get a paper check. I mean, it's just like, get your check, and you have all your stuff on there. And it's just, and when you're paid your whole life with a check every other Friday or Thursday or whenever the day it was, it's like a little bit painful. And I'm sure the guys behind the scenes implementing the systems had to be painful for you as well. I need to close this segment, though, because we're going to come up on, this is what I'm telling you guys. That's why David will be back, because it's so interesting. And I hope that a lot of the historical perspective, that some of the younger listeners get the point of this, because we both love the university so much and it's done so much for all of us. But if you don't know the historical perspective of some of these systems and the people that help put 30, 40, 50 years of their lives into that institution, you miss the picture. And that's what we're trying to do here. Again, resetting. Dave Brower is our guest today. MSU legend, the controller. Now, I hope we all know what a controller is and a CFO. You're listening to The Tom Matt Show.
Thank you again to Brock Fletcher, real estate agent at the selling team with Keller Williams Realty. For more information on services provided by Brock, please call his personal cell phone at 517-303-3262 or by emailing Brock at kwsellingteam.com. This is The Tom Matt Show.
Welcome to the Tom Matt Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. I was just telling my guest, Dave Brower, this episode could easily go 2-3 hours. We could just keep chatting and talking and chatting because we start getting into, where I came around the university and some of the systems and stuff. And it's interesting to connect the dots and especially with the technology. And let me tell you guys, it's big business at the university. If you don't have people like a David Brower, who is, your CFO or he's the controller, he's the guy who is put in charge by very, very smart people at the top. You got your hands full. And so just trying to get a little bit of a picture, David, of the whole process that we're going through. We're going to come up on the Retirees Association stuff here in a second, and we'll talk about that. But let's finish the thread of you putting in the EBS system and the magnitude of this whole, because not only did you not have a campus network, okay, then you had buildings that were wired for their own networks. Everybody remember all that. Then there wasn't a campus network. Now there's starting to be a campus network. And luckily, we have a person like a Roy Simon, who is really smart and connected to ComArts, understood the value of the network cables and especially the fiber. I mean, you had to have plans ahead of time with all of this. Go ahead, Dave. Please continue this conversation because you've got systems, you've got desktops, you've got building, you got local area networks, wide area networks. This is when things start really getting crazy.
We developed a team to work with the campus community to define what their needs were. And then we worked with this quality committee, open source committee, to develop software over 3 years. We got a grant of $500,000, and we each put in $500,000. We can prove you could develop software with people spread all over the country. We had people really across the country in several different institutions on this. And we brought it together on budget. And then the year I retired, we took it out to Hawaii for the National Association of Accountants to demonstrate what we'd achieved. And the idea was, if you develop this system for higher education, you want to reduce the life cycle cost of financial systems for an institution. And the quality financial system is still used today. It was maintained and updated over a number of years by the Quality Foundation that owned the software. And as long as you continue to put your developments and improvements of the system in, you could use it for free. And so this system costs us a pittance compared to roughly $25-30 million it costs to put in the HR payroll system, because we were paying outside consultants. In the quality system, we have the source code. We can change it ourselves. In the case of the purchase software, we have to rely on outside vendor to update the system. And that's the same way today, same thing.
How did it work with all of I'm just curious now with the accounting of, like, think of it as a city, everybody, and you have we're our own city, and we take care of all of our own stuff, our utilities, our water, our phones, our heat, you name it, everything, food, our students. I mean, how's the communication? How were the account numbers set up so that that whole system could come together? When was that actually? I mean, it had to have some form throughout time, but when it came to the network side of things, were you very involved with that?
Well, yeah, I had several teams working with all the campus community to develop the account stream. The account number is about 11 digits long. And so we had to develop the account structure to handle the breakdown from colleges to departments to individual units within those areas. And there were some that were for research contract grants, others for different types of accounts. There were 9 different fund groups, still are 9 different fund groups in the university, which is why we wanted to have an open source system we could control the account structure for to make it robust enough to handle the accounting needs of the institution.
I don't know if everybody's getting the picture of how big this whole system is and how it takes such an army of people to implement this. Now, there is every building on campus is connected via fiber. If not, some of the outlying farms might be on a long-range Wi-Fi. But
Tom, the ledgers for the university are available the next day now. You just have to wait 2 weeks to get them. And so the timeliness of financial information and the ability to get reports on a variety of things, very, very robust user supports.
So much of your career, you were continually learning. I mean, because you're implementing brand new systems that have never been. So talk about the first. Okay, so we got the campus finally. how in the heck you guys got the community to agree on certain things so that you could build these, because you got to come up with the system idea first, right?
It was just talking to them and continually going back to them. We all knew there were needs here, and we had to find mechanisms to help fund them and help them get the staff trained and supported, get the funding to be able to implement the changes. But we also wanted to make sure they understood we were listening to their needs and building those into the system.
And that's the whole point. It's like getting that communication so especially after people have invested money, if you can just tell them why it benefits them, it will work. Okay. Got to shift gears here because we're going to run out of time here. And I apologize to everybody. We could continue these conversations with the historical perspective of MSU, and we will. We'll get Dave back because I really, really enjoy these, just talking about the systems and where we were and where we're going. And if you could just imagine how far we've come in this short time in our lives, David's life, my life, and where we're going to be going in the next 20 or 30 years, it's kind of incredible. But David, let's shift gears and go into the volunteer post-retirement refirement zone. Again, you're the king of refirement. You were refiring while you were doing your career before you even got close to retirement. So let's talk about that. Since you have refired in 2011, you've been very active with the MSU Retirees Association and other very, very good groups like the Y. And I wanted to ask you specifically, because you're in really good shape. I mean, really, really good shape. And I'm not just throwing idle praise out there because you know me pretty well now. It's like I don't do that kind of stuff. But how impactful has the Y been for you and your personal physical health throughout your life and your performance and the things that you do at the Y? Can you talk about that for a second?
Very, very important, Tom. I learned to swim at the Y and about 4 years old in 1951. And when I lived in Lansing, the Y was close by. I could walk to the old Lenawee branch downtown. And as I continued to grow, I played basketball. But when we moved to Okemos, we were away from the Y a little bit. There was a period there where I couldn't use it as much. But when I was in public accounting, they wanted you to get engaged with various organizations. So I was got involved with the Y board in 1980. And I also started realizing I needed to find a way to relieve stress and to try and stay in shape. I started to put on some weight. And so I started working out, playing racquetball, basketball, biking. And it's something I continued to enjoy and right through my retirement. And I had a stint of going rollerblading for about 25 years. You go down to Kensington Metro Park, but the Y has been instrumental, and I thoroughly am enmeshed in their outreach activities to try and develop and help kids in a healthy way. And I just respect everything they've done. And I never knew when I started working with them in 1980 that I'd still be involved today. And their 150th anniversary is next year for the Metro system. They've grown from one branch to 3 branches and 2 camps. And so I've been involved with them for roughly 75 years, or half of their existence. So
wow.
They're doing great things in the community.
I know that's a big part of your life, and I know that the MSU Retirees Association is as well. Let's talk about that and your outstanding service to the MSU Retirees Association. Sandy and I are new to the organization, but we're very much looking forward to continuing to do what we can to support your efforts. But talk about you and your career over there and how it's very valuable to the retirees of the unit. I find it to be a complete honor to be considered to be a retiree from MSU. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. Isn't that the way you should look at it?
Totally agree, Tom. And research shows staying active and involved in retirement is critical to your health. Making those connections. And I worked for 32 years at the university. I had a lot of friends and activities, social, athletic, cultural. When the Wharton Center opened up in 1952, I worked with the first director there to work out procedures. And there were some growing pains. I mean, at that time, you paid people with cash. So he wanted a satchel of $50,000 cash on a weekend to pay off the retirement. These things didn't work in our system. But over the years, I had the opportunity not only to attend the shows since it opened up, but also to work with all the directors since then. And so I think these lifelong relationships and the importance of staying connected and busy in retirement is why. And when I retired, they said, well, why don't you get involved with us? I started going to the seminars and monthly meetings. And one of my friends, the former director of internal audit I worked with for many years, was a treasurer at that time. And he wanted to move on to some other things. So he got me to be treasurer of the Retiree Association around, well, I was treasurer for 10 years. And then the last 2 years, I've been president. And just the activities we're doing, the social, cultural outreach things are just a lot of fun. And we're doing some service things for the university too.
It's incredible. And I want to give you ample time. We got a minute and a half to go before we have to close this up. David Brower's been our guest today, everybody, an MSU legend, the controller. What, in your first visit to the show, Dave, what's your takeaway for our listeners? Take a minute or so and, fill in the blanks a little bit, things we covered so much. And there's so much more to the story. People don't understand how big the story is, but it's fun to talk about, isn't it?
Right, it is. And these connections you make in the university, both people I met as students, I'm still friends with several of them. One of my best friends and his wife, I just was down in Florida last year. And these lifelong connections you make, whether it's with the staff or with other individuals in the organization, you'll continue to enjoy the benefits of those relationships, Tom. And the university has a lot of neat things they're trying to do to help kids. We raise money for a scholarship program and Retirees Association, and we award 4 scholarships a year, and just trying to help students increasingly with the challenges of going to college and being successful in life. But relationships, that's the key to success, Tom.
That's the key to success. Thank you, David, for your time. I got to wrap this thing, everybody. I will have David Brower back because I knew this was going to be fun, and to the extent we can have all kinds of good conversations. If our show fits your business or group's mission, we want to be of service to you through our guests like a David Brower. Let us know. Sponsorships are available in certain aspects. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. Close every show with that. Thanks again to Dave Brower for being with us. Sandy, Brock, Mikey, Deadman. We'll talk to everybody next weekend. Have a great week. Go out and ignite your life. Remember, the Tom Matt Show is a production of Boomers Rock Media. We want to bring your story to life. And lastly, I want to say thank you again to Mitch Anderson and Vanessa, our production staff. Without you, we can't do diddly. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We are out.
The Tom Matt Show is produced by Mitch Anderson of Black Circle Studios. Original music from the Source of Light and Power by the Arc of All.